Hello and welcome. I'm Leigh-Ann Gerrans and you're watching W News, broadcasting live from the Al Arabiya studios. These are our top stories. President Trump issues a stark warning to Venezuela's incoming leader as the US moves to take control of the country's future and its oil. Denmark tells Trump to back off as he insists Greenland is key to US security and resources. And Trump warns Iran of a very harsh US response if more protesters are killed. Now, President Trump has warned Venezuela's incoming leader, Delcy Rodriguez, she will pay a very big price if she defies US demands, ahead of her swearing in later today. It comes after US forces captured Nicolas Maduro and his wife, who is now awaiting trial in New York on drug and weapons charges. While Washington insists it is not at war with Venezuela, Trump says the US will now oversee the country and its oil infrastructure. Take a listen.
The country is a mess. It's been horribly run. The oil is just flowing at a very low level, much lower than, even if it was badly run, it should have more income, more oil than what they're doing. So we're going to have the big oil companies go in, and they're going to fix the infrastructure, and they're going to invest money. We're not going to invest anything. We're going to just take care of the country. We're going to cherish the country. We're going to take care, more importantly, of the people, including Venezuelans that are living in our country that were forced to leave their country. And they're going to be taken very good care of.
For more on this, I'm joined by Venezuelan political analyst Andres Silva. Great to have you on the show. Thank you so much for joining me again. We've spoken about this many times, but as a Venezuelan, what was your initial reaction when news emerged that the US had captured Nicolas Maduro amid a large-scale military strike on Caracas?
Thank you. Well, the first reaction was of how unbelievably surreal everything felt, especially as you know, at the moment, I'm in Spain taking some days off. I wake up at 8 in the morning, I turn on the TV, and the third thing I see are some Apache helicopters flying over my city. Then a couple hours later, we see a truth from Donald Trump saying that they had taken Maduro. Then an hour later is when the government actually confirms that they do not know the whereabouts of the president and his wife. So it was a very surreal situation, a lot of mixed emotions. This is where I like to apply that famous phrase, ignorance is bliss, because while many people were immediately celebrating or taking the streets, as an analyst, where I have to take all of my opinions and take one step forward, I started immediately thinking about the aftermath and all the many scenarios that could now come in place. But just to summarize the feelings of when this happened, it was definitely a roller coaster of emotions.
And Venezuela was the wealthiest country in Latin America. It's now one of the poorest. Under Maduro, the country's infrastructure has been destroyed, and many people would agree that he was an evil man. But I think the question is what you just posed there. Who will fill that power vacuum? What happens the day after?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I think that one of the biggest issues of all these years of administration that Maduro had was precisely that they focused on the narrative, on the communications, on the social aspects of their government, but there was absolutely no proper investment in taking care of the people, of the infrastructure, of industry. We've seen how, since it is credited to the current new acting president, Delcy Rodriguez, that economic transformation that we've seen in the last couple of years in Venezuela, we've seen how inflation, it is now going back up again with the strengthening of sanctions, but we saw it a couple of years ago go all the way down to 49% inflation for the year. So we know that the only way the economy was kind of taking a different course was directly because there were other factors within the Venezuelan government that were now participating in the economic transformation. But definitely now this power vacuum that has been left by the head of state will be filled by Delcy Rodriguez at this moment. This is what for months I've been saying is the proper way to initiate a transition, because there is no governability right now possible in Venezuela for an immediate opposition government to take in, because Venezuela is not Libya or Panama. There are robust Chavista institutions that are still working in the country. We have the judicial, we have the National Assembly, we have all the judges, we have the police force, we have the armed forces, all of these, which would, of course, not simply allow a opposition government to take over. So I believe that this power vacuum has to be taken over by this figure of Delcy Rodriguez, perhaps a 6-month, 1 year, or maximum 2-year transition period. And then with the help of the United States, there could be talks of a new election.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because a lot of people have been asking that question. Why doesn't the opposition now come in and rule Venezuela? But as you said, after Hugo Chavez, it's a very difficult situation. But I just want to move the conversation on. And can Venezuela fight back against the US intervention? As President Trump has made it clear, they are running the show now, and US companies will be investing big into the oil reserves in Venezuela.
Well, the opposition can definitely, as it was seen on January 3rd, the opposition against the United States will not be military. We saw how in their first encounter, the United States was absolutely superior to the Venezuelan armed forces. But I believe that the opposition to what Donald Trump stated that he wants to do with Venezuela has to come from within the Venezuelans themselves, be it the Venezuelan companies and all the industries that are here inside the country. The tough negotiations that Delcy Rodriguez will now head to ensure that those conditions with which the United States will be back producing and exporting and exploiting oil inside of Venezuela, that they will also bring benefits to the Venezuelan people. And in third, those international companies that will be coming into Venezuela, they will also be stakeholders and participants in making sure that Donald Trump understands that he will not be governing Venezuela as he initially stated. This will be much more like what Secretary of State Marco Rubio said that they would actually do, which is they will not be leading Venezuela, but they will be guiding the transition. So I believe that they have to be very conscious that their role in this new stage of Venezuelan politics will be to make sure that there is open cooperation, which a new acting President Delcy Rodriguez said that she is willing to have with the United States, but at the same time, that the Venezuelan people do not end up becoming something like what they had with Panama in the 90s, or just another vessel country for American companies.
And just a quick question before I do let you go. You're currently on holiday. Are you able to go back to Venezuela at the moment? And what are people in Caracas telling you? You're just explaining to me the future of what the US has outlined for Venezuela when it comes to oil, when it comes to governance. Do you think that the future is now bright for Venezuela, or is there still too many unanswered questions?
Well, for the first part, I will be able, at least at the moment, to make it back to my country with an international flight. I will be flying to Colombia and then to Venezuela, which at the moment, those flights are standing. And then afterwards, what we are hearing from my friends, colleagues, and family in Venezuela is that even though the situation seems to be calming down, everyone is returning to work and things are slowly going back to let's call it normality, but there's no normality about the current situation in the country, but that there is a heavy military and paramilitary presence in the streets of the country. And as for the course that we will now be taking on this new period, I believe that we have to split it in two. There will be the first phase of government transition, which is what Delcy Rodriguez is heading at the moment. There is a lot of expectation within analysts, experts, and international stakeholders that she will be able to at least lead the country for a short period of time into a certain sense of stability before they start transitioning into something else, into that second stage that I can see, which is the democratic transition. That is the period where they will finally call elections. We know that in the Venezuelan constitution, there are two forms of absence for a president so that the vice president takes over. There is the temporary absence and there is the permanent absence. But since Venezuela is still Venezuela, the courts decided to call it a forceful absence, which does not exist. And by calling it that, what this is doing is giving the Venezuelan government leeway to say, no, this is not the temporary absence where we have 3 months to call elections, or the permanent absence where we have 30 days to call elections, but this is a third new and invented type of absence where they will be giving Delcy Rodriguez some time to lead this transition. But I do believe that if they are committed to doing this transition, and if they are committed to truly helping the Venezuelan people, what the Trump administration did will definitely make Venezuela great again.
Andres Silva, as always, thank you so much for joining me and for your analysis. Let's continue this conversation now with Norman Rule, former senior US intelligence officer and also Middle East expert. Norman, pleasure to have you on the show. First of all, Nicolas Maduro is due in court in the next hour or so after he was captured over the weekend in Caracas. How did the highly elite secretive unit Delta Force pull off this surprise, bold operation?
No, thank you for having me. What we saw was a combination of extraordinary training, technology, intelligence work, and many months of focus that put together a highly practiced and detailed operation involving personnel who, in essence, had worked through the operation so many times with such a deep understanding of the target and the environment and the threat that they were able to achieve a stunning success. And the environment that was needed to be understood was not only the achievement of the capture of former President Maduro, but it was understanding his security guards, the air defenses, the technology used by the country's military. It's really quite a complicated series of challenges that were simultaneously overcome. And it says an awful lot about U.S. technology and intelligence and its military capacity.
Norman, I was thinking after I was watching this on the news, I'm sure this is going to be the plot for many films to come. As you say, it was pretty extraordinary what the US military managed to pull off here in Venezuela and the capturing of Nicolas Maduro. Do you think that right now what they have managed to carry out in Venezuela is something that Donald Trump is trying to put out as a warning to possibly other countries?
Well, yes, but I think it should be taken into read in light of the December 2025 National Security Strategy, which makes it very clear that the United States is not interested in intervention in countries, although there will be brief interventionist activity conducted when U.S. core national security interests are seen to be threatened, especially in the Western Hemisphere. I think that document deserves quite serious focus. And we are seeing this play out in Venezuela, and we're seeing the United States undertake these activities really in a very textbook fashion, because as you've seen, the president has stated, we're not interested in destabilizing the country. We're not interested in nation building. This is an interest-based operation where the United States is talking about ending the threat of narco-terrorism, as the president has described it, of removing the control of adversaries over a massive economic pool of Venezuela's oil, China's influence, also removing Cubans and Iranians from something so close to the U.S. soil. That's a very interest-based approach, but democracy is something that he's leaving up to the Venezuelans to achieve, and that will take some time. And he's not going to destabilize Venezuela with a massive U.S. footprint and in a rushed approach to achieve that. Again, this is laid out in the National Security Strategy in December.
As I mentioned earlier, a handcuffed Maduro was pictured on his way to a New York courthouse. But the big question that many people are asking today, many analysts are talking about, was Trump's attack on Venezuela illegal? This is the big question.
Right. So the United States is going to approach this probably through a legal approach that will have the following theory. First, former President Maduro's immunity was not justified because he was not the real president of Venezuela. The election was stolen. So he was an illegitimate, non-recognized leader functioning as the operational head of a transnational narco-terrorism enterprise. So the indictment, which was put out in 2020 and then reissued again, states that he was enabling the transmission of narcotics to the United States, which the Trump administration views as an attack upon the United States. It involves also the smuggling of weapons, and it also involved the attack upon other countries of use of involvement with terrorist groups that is laid out in the indictment, and also that the Venezuelan state had not been willing to take action against that, and the Trump administration in previous months, using its blockade, had given the Venezuelan state an opportunity to do so. So the United States is likely to say, look, this was a threat against our country. This man was not a legitimate president. We gave you opportunities to remove this individual. This threat killed Americans and involved weapons and deadly drugs. We took limited proportional action. We did not take a threat against your country beyond that. And we put him into a civilian trial in our country per a legal indictment. End of story.
What does President Donald Trump do next? And where does he go from here? Because I think the big question is, we've seen him capture Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela, and people are now talking about Colombia, they're talking about Greenland. Norman, do you think that's all unfounded, or do you think there should be real fears?
Well, I want to go back to the December 2025 National Security Strategy, where this administration appears quite serious and determined to say that if there are countries that are operating or perceived to be operating terrorist organizations or narcotics operations or allowing mass migration that is threatening U.S. security, this administration is going to do something about it.
But then, Norman, sorry, it's quite interesting, because when Donald Trump was campaigning, he said no more forever wars. And the MAGA movement also made that pretty clear. And to a lot of people watching this might seem like something Donald Trump is going back on. He was convinced that they wouldn't be attacking other countries. He was in Saudi Arabia and said that he was going to keep out of politics and other places. He hasn't seemed to have stuck to that, has he?
No, I would disagree, because, again, going back to the document, this is not a war. This is a very limited military attack. And you want to be careful that your definition of war does not expand to include any sort of military attack, any sort of military activity possible. A single use of a single firing of a weapon or a single military attack is not a war. What happened in Iraq, what happened in Afghanistan, that is a war. Hundreds of thousands of U.S. troops, tanks, aircraft, et cetera, that's a war. An attack that takes place in an hour and a half, that is not a war. That is a military action, certainly. But to call that a war, I think, is going to be a stretch. And that's how this administration will see that. But again, with a focus primarily on the Western Hemisphere and in other places of far more limited action. And I think we saw that in June in Iran play out in a very similar way. Iran's weaponization of its nuclear program was seen as a threat. A very limited military action took place. Military action ended, and the next day the administration stated, we're willing to begin nuclear talks with the Iranians if they're serious.
Norman Rule, brilliant to have you on the show. Thank you so much for speaking to me.
You're welcome.
Now, the US strikes on Venezuela has sparked protests and condemnation throughout Asia. Rallies against the attacks and arrest of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro have been held in Pakistan, South Korea and India, while North Korea and China have condemned the attacks. Chris Gilbert has this report.
Outside the U.S. Embassy in Seoul, protesters call for an end to the U.S. military action in Venezuela. chanting slogans like "Condemn Trump's kidnapping of Maduro" and "Hands off Venezuela." It's just one of several rallies held throughout the region since the US strikes. In Pakistan, protesters gathered in front of the Karachi Press Club, calling for Maduro's immediate release.
We demand that a case of criminal war crimes be filed against Trump in the International Court of Justice. He has killed thousands of Palestinians. He has attacked an independent country with which there was no dispute on a false accusation and has abducted its president. This is a very dangerous trend and should be condemned.
In Sydney, locals gathered outside the town hall in defiance of a police ban on public demonstrations. 3 people were arrested but later released without charge. Similar rallies also took place in Melbourne. Through its state media, China condemned the US, accusing it of breaking international law. Its foreign minister, Wang Yi, says no one country should play the role of world police.
China always opposes the use of threat of force as well as any imposition of one country's will on another. China is willing to work with the rest of the international community to uphold the United Nations Charter and adhere to the equality of all countries' sovereignty.
North Korea also used state media to denounce the strike as, quote, the most serious form of encroachment of sovereignty. Maduro has sent letters to North Korea's leader Kim Jong-un in the past and met with dignitaries from the country. And in India, hundreds staged protests in New Delhi and other cities in solidarity with Venezuela. Leftist parties organized the demonstrations in the capital where protesters chanted anti-Trump slogans. The protesters say the US military action is concerning and are promising more rallies to come. Chris Gilbert, Arabiya English.
Denmark's Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen has warned Trump to stop the threats over Greenland, saying the US cannot annex the territory. She emphasized Greenland is part of Denmark, a NATO member, and covered by existing defense agreements. Trump doubled down, citing the island's strategic location and mineral wealth for US security. For more on this, I'm joined from Copenhagen by international relations expert, Dr. Malik Sittis. Thank you so much for your time this evening, Dr. Sittis. Following the US operation in Venezuela, how nervous is the government in Denmark about President Trump setting his eyes on Greenland?
Thank you for having me. The Danish government, the Danish politicians at the parliament, and also the Danish civil society and media, they are all concerned about what's happening in Greenland and the position of the United States, especially after the Venezuelan situation. The concern is very big in the Danish society. The Danish media all the time discussing such an issue. It's the first time the Danish political system, especially in the field of security studies, the United States is considered one of the biggest threats for the Danish society. So it is a very big concern at the national level and also the Danish foreign policy in general.
And the Danish Prime Minister has hit back at President Donald Trump's threats to annex Greenland. Will the US president take any notice of what Mette Frederiksen has actually had to say?
Not really, because all the time the President of the United States disregard the position of the Danish government. The Danish government have provided different strategies to discuss the issue of Greenland with the United States through diplomatic means. However, the government of the United States disregard the position of the Denmark as such. And it also been disregarded the position of the European Union by the United States. So it's a very complicated situation. Although the Danish government, the European politicians try to use diplomatic channels, However, there is not a positive responses from the United States, and the President of the United States continuously saying that the Danish government do not have the ability to control and manage the Greenland. And it's also been a huge critics from the government of the United States by the visit of the Vice President, Mr. Vice President of the United States in the Greenland, and he was very critical about the condition of the life of Greenland people, and they criticized the Danish government of discrimination. So it is the relationship between Denmark and the United States is very critical at the moment.
Some people would argue the relationship between Europe and the United States is also critical at the moment when it comes to the war in Ukraine and differing opinions on many subjects. But President Trump has repeatedly spoken about wanting Greenland since taking office a year ago. Why does the US president feel this territory is strategically important? Why does he want it?
There are two elements in it. The first one, Greenland is a very rich island with a lot of very useful sources for the political and also economic system of the United States as keeping the hegemony of the United States in all over the world. The second issue is that Greenland is politically situated in a very important area of the world. Greenland is the biggest island of the world, which is bridging the European countries to the United States and the rest of the world. So that's why two elements, one economic elements, the second one is strategic elements, playing such an important role of being Greenland one of the important elements of the Trump's doctrine.
And the US President Donald Trump has refused to rule out military action to gain control of Greenland. If a US military operation is mobilized, hypothetically speaking, can NATO or Europe do anything about it at all?
You know, legally saying, all members of the NATO alliance should respect each other's territorial integrity. It is a very important element in the charter of NATO. However, the reality is something else. You know, the United States is the main donor and also provides the equipments for NATO. So I don't think that the NATO members will sacrifice such an important role of the United States by supporting a small country with 6 million people in Denmark. So NATO will not be a good tool for the Danish government to protect themselves. So the best way is actually to provide a proper diplomatic negotiations with the support of the European Union, and even to involve some other non-European supporters of Denmark to support this idea and to provide some diplomatic negotiations with the United States, because NATO is under control of the United States.
Dr. Malik Sittis, thank you so much for joining me. Brilliant to have you on the show.
My pleasure.
Now, President Trump has warned Iran it will be hit very hard by the US if more protesters are killed amid demonstrations over the cost of living. At least 20 people have died since the protests begun in Tehran, the largest unrest since 2022 to 2023, when there was a different movement. Trump said Washington is watching very closely and may respond if violence does continue. Take a listen to what he had to say.
There's been protesters killed in Iran. You said we were locked and loaded, ready to go. What is the line there for when the U.S. is going to get involved in those protests?
We'll take a look. We're watching it very closely. If they start killing people like they have in the past, I think they're going to get hit very hard by the United States.
For more on this, I'm joined from London by Omid Habibian, Iranian British senior journalist. Omid, I do apologize. Great to have you on the show. Protests sparked by Iran's failing economy have now entered the 9th day and appear to be gaining momentum across the country. What is the situation right now on the ground when it comes to these protests?
Thank you. As we speak, there are a lot of protests around the country, in Tehran, in the capital, in south, west, east, and all parts of the Tehran are already we are witnessing the nightly protests. The protests also continue during the day in the west part of the country, in Ilam, Kermanshah, and some Kurdish cities, and also in the south, in Khuzestan. So it seems that this kind of the protest and the movement, we are already seeing that it's not going to be stopped very easily. And this is the message that it seems that the judiciary and the government also understand that they have to try to use a tactic to at the same time repress the protests and the strikes. And at the other hand, they are going to try to do some kind of the negotiation mechanism, but we don't see any kind of the negotiations. So as we speak, there are a lot of people injured in Ilam, and also there are reports that about 25 people killed. So this is the protest is because of the economical causes, is getting to spread to all around the country, and everybody is going to be participate. Even they are not participate in the street through the social media, we can see really much more than the 2022 protest was the Mahsa Amini movement. Right now is everybody saying it's we are against the regime.
And I just wanted to speak to you a little bit about President Donald Trump, because he says if Iran starts killing people like they have in the past, I think they're going to get hit very hard by the US. Now, following the US operation in Venezuela, how likely is a US attack on Iran?
So a lot of people are thinking that this is the message that the regime is going to be understand. And this is possible. This is the strong message to the leader of the Islamic Republic that he could be the target. It could be the target if the people are getting killed by the security forces and military forces. So as I said, there are reports that right now 25 people are killed by the security forces. So this is the support that most people in Iran or outside of Iran diaspora also looking for that for decades from the governments around the world. And this is the strong message that can maybe some kind of the signals that the leader of Iran and the regime can understand that this is not the other time. This time is different.
And the head of Iran's judiciary, you mentioned this earlier, says the country will offer no leniency to rioters, though the public has a right to demonstrate. Is the government seeking rare dialogue with demonstrators in Iran?
Actually, the government tries to say that we are going to negotiate. Even the spokesperson of the government today said that the prices is going to be rise, but we are going to control it, and we are trying to make some kind of the negotiation with the protesters. But as I said, that there is no negotiation. As we said, there's live amounts and firing at the people in the street. And the judiciary already arrested everyone that they can arrest it from the artists, from the intellectual journalists, workers, the women rights people in cities, in capital. So they are trying hard to stop this movement, and because it takes about 9 days and 9 nights, and the military and security forces are extremely tired. And if it's continue for weeks and months, this can be a result to something that could be end of the Islamic Republic. So they are trying to warn the people, spread the fear among the people. But as we can see, there is no sign of that this going to be a stop.
And Netanyahu says Israel won't let Iran restore the ballistic missile program. How much pressure is the regime facing in Iran from President Donald Trump and also from Benjamin Netanyahu?
Actually, this is what many people that are thinking about, because if the regime thinks that they are going to be collapsed by the demonstration, protest, strike, so maybe they are going to do some kind of the war games with Israel, and there's no doubt that they're going to be hit hard by the US and Israel. That's happened a few months ago. So this is a very special moment for Israel and US politician, Trump administration, to see what's going on in Iran and what is the outcome of this protest. So this is the moment that everybody is looking to Iran to see if the Iranian are going to be overcome of the regime, or the Islamic Republic is going to do another war game with Israel or other kind of the games in the region. So this is really sensitive and important moment. So it is very important for Israel also to see what's going on in Iran.
Omid Habibian, thank you so much for speaking to me.
Thank you for having me.
Let's take a look at some of the other stories making the headlines today. At least 30 people have been killed in Nigeria's Niger state after armed men stormed a village in the region. State authorities say the attackers set fire to a local market, looted shops and also kidnapped a number of people. Security forces have been deployed to help rescue them. Police have now identified all the bodies of the people who died in a bar fire in a Swiss ski resort on New Year's Eve. Last night, hundreds joined a special Sunday mass for the victims, who were aged between 14 to 39 years old. A criminal investigation into the French couple who manage the Le Constellation bar is now underway. A far-left activist group in Germany has claimed responsibility for a suspected arson attack that left tens of thousands of homes, as well as hospitals and businesses, without power over the weekend. Early on Saturday morning, several cables on a bridge were spotted burning near a power plant in the southwest of Berlin. In a statement, the Vulcan Group said that the fossil fuel economy was intended to target of the action rather than cutting power. And that's all from us on W News. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Also follow us on X. And we'll be back in a couple of hours' time with W News Extra. Goodbye and thank you for watching.